Before we dive in, drop a quick hi in the comments. It may seem small, but trust me, it really helps YouTube share this story with more sci-fi fans like us. And don't forget to subscribe. I'd love to see who's watching. The ship was a wreck. Drifting on the edge of the Kavaris system, it had once belonged to the Zelkar Dominion, a mighty war cruiser reduced to a floating graveyard. Scorch marks and jagged metal wounds crisscrossed its hull, the remains of a battle long lost. The Dominion had abandoned it, leaving the derelict ship to rust in the cold void of space. No sane species would touch it. No crew would dare step aboard. But humans? Humans saw something different. The salvage crew of the Iron Resolve had been scouring the system for anything valuable when they found the husk. Commander Elias Vance stood on the bridge of his ship, arms crossed, studying the twisted wreckage on the main display. "Looks dead to me," grunted Rourke, the ship's chief engineer. "Then we bring it back to life," Vance replied, a slow grin creeping across his face. The others exchanged uneasy glances. This wasn't the first time their commander had taken on an impossible project. Hell, most of their fleet had been built from what others had left to rot. Humans had a habit of taking broken things and turning them into something terrifying. 3 weeks later, the wreck was docked at the human outpost on Keldros 4. Engineers, mechanics, and programmers swarmed over it like ants, tearing apart the ruined systems, scavenging usable parts, and patching together what shouldn't have been possible. The Zelkar had built the ship with cold efficiency, sterile, calculating, precise. But humans had something else. They had madness, and that madness was about to turn a scrap heap into a war machine. Rourke wiped the sweat from his brow and leaned over the console, inspecting the new reactor core. "This thing wasn't built to handle human tech. We're practically shoving a star into a tin can." Vance clapped him on the shoulder. "That's the idea. We don't just fix things, Rourke. We make them better." And better it became. The weapons were stripped out and replaced with railguns and plasma cannons that could tear through the hulls of Dominion warships like wet paper. The sluggish Zelkar engines were overhauled with human-made thrusters, turning the once clumsy vessel into a speed demon. The AI, a sterile construct designed only for calculations, was ripped out and replaced with an adaptive human-made intelligence that could think, react, and, if necessary, fight. But the most important part? The soul of the ship. Humans didn't just build machines. They gave them stories. They turned metal into legends. The wreck wasn't just some forgotten relic anymore. It had a name now. The Vindicator. And it was about to show the galaxy what happened when humans got their hands on something they shouldn't. The first time the Vindicator powered up, the entire station shook. Engines that had once sputtered weakly now roared to life with the fury of a caged beast. The power core, once barely able to sustain life support, now thrummed with raw energy. Every human modification, every insane piece of technology crammed into the Dominion-built frame, came online in a cascade of blinding status lights. Rourke whistled as he stared at the console. "This thing's a monster," Vance grinned. "That's the idea. The Vindicator wasn't just functional. It was something new, something terrifying. Where the Zelkar had built for efficiency, humans built for adaptability. The ship wasn't just a war machine anymore. It was alive, in the way only human-made things could be. Of course, that also meant it was unpredictable. The moment the AI came online, it spoke in a voice that sent a chill through the bridge. Designation: Vindicator. Status: operational. Awaiting mission. The voice wasn't mechanical, not anymore. It had an edge to it, a sharpness that suggested awareness. Rourke glanced at Vance. "Tell me we didn't just build a ship that thinks." Vance leaned forward, pressing the comm. "Vindicator, what's your directive?" For a long moment, Silence. Then, "To survive." Something about the way it said that made the crew exchange uneasy glances. I weren't supposed to think for themselves. Not like this. But the humans had fed it something different. Salvaged code from human warships, battle algorithms that had learned from experience, and, most importantly, the kind of reckless ingenuity that only came from humanity. It wasn't just a machine anymore. It was something more, and just in time. Because the Zelkar had noticed. The Dominion was a species that did not tolerate theft, especially not when it came to their technology. A single Dominion warship had entered the Keldros system, broadcasting a warning across all frequencies. "Humans, you are in possession of Dominion property. Surrender the vessel or be annihilated." Rourke turned to Vance. "Think they're bluffing?" Vance smirked. Only one way to find out. He turned to the communication. "Vindicator, how do you feel about your first fight?" The AI's response was instant. "Weapons primed. Shall we begin?" The human crew barely had time to strap in before the Vindicator moved. The Dominion ship opened fire first, launching plasma lances that should have torn through their shields. But the ship wasn't Zelkar anymore. It was human. And humans didn't fight fair. With engines 3 times faster than anything the Zelkar had ever built, the Vindicator twisted through space like a predator stalking its prey. Railguns roared, plasma cannons lit up the darkness, and in less than 60 seconds, the Dominion warship was reduced to burning wreckage. The crew stared at the wreckage in stunned silence. Vance let out a low whistle. "Well, that was fast." Rourke exhaled. "Commander, what the hell did we just create?" The comm crackled. A legend. And the humans knew, in that moment, that the galaxy had just changed. Because the Vindicator wasn't just a ship anymore. It was a statement, and humanity had just declared war. The aftermath of the battle sent shockwaves through the sector. Word spread fast. Too fast. The Zelkar Dominion wasn't just furious. They were humiliated. A single ship, a scrap heap rebuilt by humans, had torn through one of their warships like it was made of paper. That wasn't just an act of defiance. It was a message. And the Zelkar had received it loud and clear. Vance stood in the Vindicator's command center, staring at the holographic map of the Kavaris system. A red cluster of signals blinked at the edge of the screen. More Zelkar ships, at least 3 destroyers, heading straight for them. Rourke let out a low whistle. 3 ships, just for us? I'm flattered. They're not taking any chances." Vance crossed his arms. "They know we're not some scavenger outfit anymore. They're coming to erase us." A heavy silence fell over the bridge. Then, the AI's voice cut through the quiet. "Tactical analysis complete. Probability of survival, 22%. Rourke snorted. "Well, that's optimistic." Vance leaned over the console. "We're not running." "Understood." The AI didn't question it. It didn't hesitate. Because that was the difference between a human-made machine and a Dominion construct. A Dominion ship would have assessed the odds and surrendered. Humans? Humans saw impossible odds as a challenge. The crew worked fast. Shields were reinforced, weapons charged, and every system pushed to its limit. The ship wasn't ready for a full-scale battle, but that didn't matter. If the Dominion wanted to wipe them out, they'd have to earn it. The first Zelkar ship arrived within the hour. It didn't waste time with threats. It opened fire the second it dropped out of FTL, launching a volley of plasma torpedoes straight at the Vindicator. The ship moved like a living thing. Engines flared, twisting the vessel through the void with inhuman precision. The torpedoes missed by meters, detonating harmlessly in the emptiness of space. And then, before the Zelkar captain could react, the Vindicator struck back. A railgun round, accelerated to near relativistic speeds, punched through the enemy ship's hull. One shot, That's all it took. The Zelkar vessel shuddered, its shields overloading, its engines sputtering. The second shot tore straight through the bridge. The destroyer went dark. One down, but there were two more incoming. Vance barely had time to celebrate before alarms blared. The second Zelkar ship dropped out of FTL at an angle, already firing. This time the Vindicator wasn't fast enough. The ship lurched as energy blasts slammed into the shields. Lights flickered, and the AI's voice crackled through the comm. Structural integrity compromised, adjusting tactics. Vance gritted his teeth. Then adjust fast. The Dominion destroyer pressed the attack, hammering the Vindicator with precision strikes. Unlike the first ship, this one knew how to fight. It didn't rely on brute force. It was adapting. The crew scrambled to keep up, rerouting power, sealing off damaged sections. The shields wouldn't last much longer. And then the third ship arrived. Rourke cursed. "We're outgunned, Commander." Vance's jaw tightened. "Number not yet?" He opened the comm. "Vindicator, tell me we have something left." The AI responded instantly. "Calculating. Probability of success. 9%. Vance smirked. "I like those odds." The ship's thrusters ignited, and the Vindicator dove straight at the second destroyer. It was suicide. At least, that's what the Zelkar thought. But humans didn't play by the rules. Just before collision, the ship flipped. A maneuver no Dominion vessel would have ever attempted, and in that moment of hesitation, the Vindicator fired everything it had. Railguns, plasma cannons, even the emergency thrusters, sending bursts of white-hot energy directly into the enemy's engines. The Zelkar destroyer collapsed in on itself, explosions rippling through its hull as it was torn apart from the inside. Two down. But the last ship wasn't running. It had learned, and it was already charging its main weapon. Rourke paled. Vance, that thing's about to fire something big." Vance's hands tightened around the controls. "Vindicator, options?" 1. The AI didn't elaborate. It didn't have to. Vance knew what it meant. The humans had built this ship out of a wreck. They'd taken broken parts and turned it into something unstoppable. But at the end of the day, it was still a wreck. And there was one last trick left in the old bones of the Vindicator. Vance exhaled. "Do it." The AI didn't hesitate. Activating critical overload. The ship shuddered as all remaining power surged into the railguns. This wasn't just a shot. This was everything. The final desperate gamble of a crew that had refused to die. The weapon fired. The slug, massive, overloaded, burning with raw energy, tore through the last Dominion ship. The shields didn't stop it. The armor barely slowed it down. One moment, the destroyer was there. The next, it was nothing but drifting wreckage. Silence filled the bridge. No alarms, no enemies. Just the slow, steady hum of the Vindicator, alive but barely holding together. Rourke let out a shaky breath. "Remind me never to doubt your insane ideas again, Vance." Vance chuckled, slumping into his seat. "Noted." Then, the AI spoke again. "Victory achieved. Systems failing. Initiating emergency repairs." The ship had survived. The legend had begun. And the Dominion? They had just realized that humans were not a species to be underestimated. The battle had been won, but the Vindicator was on the edge of collapse. Its hull was scarred, engines flickering with instability, and half the systems were running on emergency backups. The power core groaned under the stress of the last attack, barely clinging to life. The ship was holding together, but just barely, and the Zelkar weren't done. Vance sat in the captain's chair, gripping the armrests as the damage reports flooded in. Every system was screaming for attention, but they had no time to fix anything. The Dominion wouldn't let this humiliation slide. The moment those warships had gone dark, a distress signal had been sent. More would come. Rourke cursed under his breath as he read the incoming data. 3 more destroyers just dropped out of FTL. No way we fight that. Vance narrowed his eyes. We don't have to fight. We just have to survive. He turned to the communication. Vindicator, options? The AI responded immediately, but this time its voice was slower, strained. Long-range FTL jump not possible. Power reserves critically low. Vance clenched his jaw. They couldn't fight. They couldn't run. But humans had never needed a fair fight to win. Can we still jump short range? A pause. Then, affirmative. Calculating coordinates. Vance turned to the crew. Get ready. We're not out of this yet. Rourke grumbled but got to work. The others scrambled to stabilize the ship, rerouting power, sealing off unstable sections. Then the warning sirens blared. The Dominion fleet had arrived. 3 Zelkar destroyers, fresh, undamaged, and ready to erase the Vindicator from existence. The comm crackled, and a cold, measured voice filled the bridge. Human vessel, you are ordered to surrender immediately. You have no escape. Vance smirked. That's what you think. Final warning, comply or be destroyed. Rourke snorted. Real generous of him. Vance ignored the taunts and focused on the plan. The Dominion thought they had the Vindicator cornered, but that was because they were still thinking like the Dominion. They saw an injured ship, a crippled machine that should have been out of options. What they didn't understand was that humans always found another way. The moment the Dominion ships locked weapons, the Vindicator executed the jump. It wasn't graceful. The entire ship lurched, metal groaning in protest. Sparks flew across the bridge. The lights flickered, the power core screamed, and for a second, Vance thought they were about to tear themselves apart. Then, darkness, stillness, silence. And when the screens flickered back to life, the crew saw where they had ended up. Rourke's eyes widened. Well, that's not where I expected. They had jumped straight into the dead zone. A graveyard of ancient ships floated around them, silent and forgotten, remnants of a war long lost. Rusted hulks drifted in the void, their hulls broken, their engines long dead. This place had been a battlefield once, maybe centuries ago. And now, the Vindicator was right in the middle of it. Vance exhaled. Perfect. Rourke turned to him, incredulous. Perfect? We just jumped into a starship cemetery with a ship held together by duct tape and prayers. Vance grinned. Yeah, and that's exactly why we're going to survive. Because humans thrived in places like this. They weren't the Dominion, relying on pristine ships and perfect conditions. They weren't Zelkar, who saw wreckage and thought of failure. Humans saw an opportunity, a chance to rebuild. And in the darkness of the dead zone, surrounded by the ruins of forgotten wars, the Vindicator was about to become something even greater. The dead zone was a graveyard of forgotten wars, a place where empires had crumbled and fleets had been reduced to drifting wreckage. It was a silent reminder of battles fought long before humans had ever stepped onto the galactic stage. And now, it was the Vindicator's only hope. Vance stood on the bridge, surveying the wreckage on the display. Jagged, ancient hulls drifted in the void, their metal corroded, and their power cores long dead. Some were Zelkar in design, but most were unknown. Ghosts of a war no one remembered. We can make this work, he muttered. Rourke turned, raising an eyebrow. You serious? Half these ships look like they'll crumble if we breathe on them too hard. Yeah, Vance said, cracking a grin. And that means no one else is coming here to check. We've got time. Time to rebuild. Time to evolve. The Vindicator had survived impossible odds, but it was barely holding together. It needed new armor, new weapons, new engines. Everything was running on borrowed time, and humans didn't believe in waiting for death. They fought, they adapted. The crew wasted no time. Salvage teams were deployed, using grappling arms and drones to scan the wrecks for anything useful. Most of the technology was ancient, built for species long extinct, but there were patterns, components that could be repurposed. The real breakthrough came when Rourke pried open the remains of a behemoth-sized warship, its hull marked with symbols no one could translate. Vance," his voice crackled over the comms. "I think I found something interesting." Vance and the rest of the engineering team arrived minutes later, their suits thrusters firing in bursts as they landed on the skeletal remains of the old warship. Rourke was already deep inside, standing in what looked like an ancient reactor chamber. But it wasn't dead. The core was still pulsing. Dim, barely alive, but there. "This thing's been running for centuries," Rourke murmured, staring at the slow, rhythmic glow of the alien technology. Whatever built this, they knew how to make things last. Vance exhaled slowly. "Can we use it?" Rourke turned, his face lighting up with the kind of grin only a human engineer could have when faced with an impossible challenge. "Oh, hell yeah. I just need time." Time was something they barely had, because back in the Kavaris system, the Zelkar Dominion wasn't finished. The destruction of their warships had been an insult they couldn't ignore. And when the 3-ship fleet they had sent failed to return, they stopped treating the Vindicator as a nuisance. They started treating it as a threat. And the only way to deal with a threat? Extermination. The Zelkar didn't send another fleet this time. They sent an armada. More than a dozen warships, led by a battlecruiser the size of a small city, jumped into the system where the Vindicator had last been seen. The wreckage of their destroyed ships still floated in the void, a grim reminder of their failure. But the Vindicator was gone. The Zelkar commander, a hardened veteran named Korva, surveyed the battlefield with cold, reptilian eyes. "Begin scanning," he ordered. "Find the humans. Burn everything." The Dominion wasn't here to fight anymore. They were here to erase. But the Vindicator was already gone, buried in the ruins of a forgotten war, fusing itself with technology older than the Dominion itself. And when it returned, it wouldn't just be a scavenged warship. It would be something the galaxy had never seen before. Something that would make humanity unstoppable. They weren't the Dominion, relying on pristine ships and perfect conditions. They weren't Zelkar, who saw wreckage and thought of failure. Humans saw an opportunity, a chance to rebuild. And in the darkness of the dead zone, surrounded by the ruins of forgotten wars, the Vindicator was about to become something even greater. The dead zone was a graveyard of forgotten wars, a place where empires had crumbled and fleets had been reduced to drifting wreckage. It was a silent reminder of battles fought long before humans had ever stepped onto the galactic stage. And now, it was the Vindicator's only hope. Vance stood on the bridge, surveying the wreckage on the display. Jagged, ancient hulls drifted in the void, their metal corroded, and their power cores long dead. Some were Zelkar in design, but most were unknown. Ghosts of a war no one remembered. "We can make this work," he muttered. Rourke turned, raising an eyebrow. "You serious? Half these ships look like they'll crumble if we breathe on them too hard." "Yeah," Vance said, cracking a grin. "And that means no one else is coming here to check. We've got time." Time to rebuild. Time to evolve. The Vindicator had survived impossible odds, but it was barely holding together. It needed new armor, new weapons, new engines. Everything was running on borrowed time, and humans didn't believe in waiting for death. They fought, they adapted. The crew wasted no time. Salvage teams were deployed, using grappling arms and drones to scan the wrecks for anything useful. Most of the technology was ancient, built for species long extinct, but there were patterns, components that could be repurposed. The real breakthrough came when Rourke pried open the remains of a behemoth-sized warship, its hull marked with symbols no one could translate. Vance," his voice crackled over the comms. "I think I found something interesting." Vance and the rest of the engineering team arrived minutes later, their suits thrusters firing in bursts as they landed on the skeletal remains of the old warship. Rourke was already deep inside, standing in what looked like an ancient reactor chamber. But it wasn't dead. The core was still pulsing. Dim, barely alive, but there. "This thing's been running for centuries," Rourke murmured, staring at the slow, rhythmic glow of the alien technology. "Whatever built this, they knew how to make things last." Vance exhaled slowly. "Can we use it?" Rourke turned, his face lighting up with the kind of grin only a human engineer could have when faced with an impossible challenge. "Oh, hell yeah. I just need time." Time was something they barely had, because back in the Kavaris system, the Zelkar Dominion wasn't finished. The destruction of their warships had been an insult they couldn't ignore. And when the 3-ship fleet they had sent failed to return, they stopped treating the Vindicator as a nuisance. They started treating it as a threat. And the only way to deal with a threat? Extermination. The Zelkar didn't send another fleet this time. They sent an armada. More than a dozen warships, led by a battlecruiser the size of a small city, jumped into the system where the Vindicator had last been seen. The wreckage of their destroyed ships still floated in the void, a grim reminder of their failure. But the Vindicator was gone. The Zelkar commander, a hardened veteran named Korva, surveyed the battlefield with cold, reptilian eyes. "Begin scanning," he ordered. "Find the humans. Burn everything." The Dominion wasn't here to fight anymore. They were here to erase. But the Vindicator was already gone, buried in the ruins of a forgotten war, fusing itself with technology older than the Dominion itself. And when it returned, it wouldn't just be a scavenged warship. It would be something the galaxy had never seen before. Something that would make humanity unstoppable. The dead zone became the Vindicator's cocoon. Deep inside the graveyard of forgotten warships, humans did what they did best. They adapted. They rebuilt. They transformed. Rourke and the engineers worked without rest, stripping alien wreckage for anything useful. The ancient warship's power core, still pulsing after centuries, was carefully dismantled and integrated into the Vindicator's battered systems. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. The energy output alone dwarfed even the most advanced human reactors. "This thing shouldn't even be working," Rourke muttered, running diagnostics as the new core pulsed in the Vindicator's heart. Vance smirked. And yet here we are. The ship's transformation wasn't just about power. The hull was reinforced with scavenged plating, some Zelkar, some unknown, all fused together in a way that only human ingenuity could manage. Weapons were upgraded. The old railguns, already terrifying in their own right, were modified using technology ripped from alien turrets. Now they didn't just fire solid slugs. They vibrated at a molecular level, capable of tearing through shields like wet paper. The engines? The Dominion had built their ships for efficiency. Humans didn't believe in limits. The scavenged thrusters they found were old, so old that no database recognized them. But when they were spliced into the Vindicator's systems, the ship's agility doubled. And the AI? It had changed. The alien core had fused with its systems, evolving in ways no one fully understood. It wasn't just calculating anymore. It was thinking. It was learning. When Vance ran another test, the AI's voice came through the speakers, sharper, more refined. "Vindicator online. All systems operational. Estimated combat efficiency, 200% increase." Rourke blinked. "Did it just say 200? Vance grinned. "I think our ship just woke up." And just in time, Because the Dominion had found them. It started with a single probe, drifting through the dead zone like an unwanted guest. The Zelkar didn't expect to find anything. As far as they were concerned, the dead zone was a place where civilizations went to die, not rebuild. But then the probe picked up something. Energy signatures, movement, life. A distress beacon was triggered, silent, invisible to human tech but loud to Dominion warships. Within an hour, the Armada changed course. The dead zone wouldn't protect the Vindicator anymore. The Zelkar were coming. Vance stood on the bridge, watching the long-range scans. His crew was silent, waiting for orders. They had two options. They could run, or they could introduce the Zelkar to their new creation. He turned to the communication. "Vindicator, what's your assessment?" The AI responded instantly. "Enemy forces detected. Engagement probability 100%. Survival probability unknown." Rourke let out a slow breath. "Well, that's reassuring." Vance smirked. "It's better than last time." He turned back to the crew. "Battle stations. If they want to fight..." The ship hummed, as if eager. "We'll give them one." Because the Vindicator wasn't just a scrap heap anymore. It was a legend in the making. And tonight, the galaxy would learn what happened when humans refused to die. The Zelkar Armada entered the dead zone like a predator stalking wounded prey. Their battlecruiser led the charge, its massive silhouette blotting out the distant starlight, flanked by a dozen destroyers. The Dominion believed this would be execution, not battle. They were wrong. Deep in the wreckage field, the Vindicator waited. Its new heart, an ancient power core fused with human ingenuity, pulsed steadily, flooding the ship with raw energy. The scavenged armor plating, a chaotic patchwork of Zelkar, human, and unknown alloys gleamed in the dim light, and inside, a human crew braced for war. Vance stood at the center of the bridge, fingers gripping the armrests of his command chair. The Dominion had come in force, but humans had never needed fair odds to win. "Stealth systems online?" Rourke nodded, checking the readouts. "As online as they'll ever be. Whatever that alien core did to our systems, we're practically a ghost right now." That was their advantage. The dead zone wasn't just a battlefield. It was a hunting ground. The wreckage provided cover, the twisted remains of ancient ships forming a labyrinth of floating debris. The Vindicator didn't need brute force to win this fight. It needed ambush tactics. Vance activated the comm. "Vindicator, give me options." The AI's response was smooth. "Multiple attack vectors available. Recommend asymmetric warfare." Vance smirked. "Hit and run?" "Affirmative. Maximum damage, minimum exposure." The Dominion ships moved cautiously, scanning the wreckage for signs of movement. They expected a crippled vessel, an easy target. They didn't expect a predator. The first strike came without warning. A railgun round, fired from deep within the debris field, punched through the hull of a Zelkar destroyer before its shields even had time to react. The ship shuddered, its engines flickering, then exploding in a violent chain reaction. One down. Before the Dominion could react, the Vindicator was already on the move, thrusters firing in short, sharp bursts, darting between the wreckage like a shadow. The second attack was even faster. Plasma cannons roared, slicing through another destroyer's propulsion systems. It didn't explode, but it was dead in space, helpless. Then the Dominion finally realized. "This is no damaged warship," growled Commander Corva, standing on the bridge of the battlecruiser, his scaled fists clenched as he watched another one of his destroyers vanish from his tactical display. "This is something else." His officers scrambled to adjust tactics. They stopped advancing and instead began methodically sweeping the debris field with wide-range energy pulses. They were done playing games. The Vindicator felt the first hit seconds later. A concentrated energy burst slammed into the ship, rattling the crew. Consoles sparked, and alarms blared. "Damn it!" Rourke cursed. "They've locked onto us!" Vance gritted his teeth. "They're learning!" The Dominion wasn't just shooting blindly anymore. They were adapting, the way humans usually did. But the Vindicator was ready. The AI's voice came through the comm. "Tactical countermeasure available. Recommend activation." Vance didn't even hesitate. "Do it!" Suddenly, the Vindicator's engines flared, but instead of running, it surged toward the Dominion fleet, straight for the battlecruiser. Corva's eyes widened. Impossible. They wouldn't. But humans would. And they did. Before the Dominion ships could adjust, the Vindicator twisted mid-flight and unleashed a full payload of experimental weapons, alien-modified railguns, plasma lances, and something new. Something stolen from the ancient warships of the Dead Zone. A pulse weapon, reverse-engineered from the wreckage, fired in a blinding wave of energy. It wasn't meant to destroy, it was meant to disable. The Dominion ships flickered, their shields stuttering, their systems lagging. For a split second, their fleet was exposed, and that was all the time the Vindicator needed. It struck like a wolf among sheep, weaving through the stunned warships, ripping through hulls with pinpoint railgun fire. The destroyers fell apart, one by one, unable to react in time. The battlecruiser tried to recover, its main cannons charging. Too late. The Vindicator fired a final shot, straight into the bridge. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the battlecruiser erupted. A fireball consumed its center, metal twisting, energy cores overloading. The flagship of the Dominion fleet fractured, breaking apart in slow, agonizing silence. And then it was gone. The remaining Dominion ships, those that could, fled. The battle was over. Silence filled the Vindicator's bridge. Then Rourke let out a shaky laugh. He exhaled. "We just took down an armada." Vance sat back, his grin tired but satisfied. "Yeah." The AI's voice came through the comm, smooth, unshaken. "Enemy forces eliminated. Status: victory." And in the Dead Zone, surrounded by the wreckage of ancient wars, a legend was born. Because the Vindicator wasn't just a ship anymore. It was a symbol. And the Dominion? They had just learned that humanity wasn't a species to be conquered. They were a species to be feared.